This lesson will cover the following topics: the cooling circuit, the cooling circuit and maintenance check. Let's look at the cooling circuit now. An engine releases heat caused by the combustion of gases and friction from the various moving parts. This heat needs to be evacuated so that the engine can operate properly and avoid overheating and damage. This is the function of the cooling circuit. The cooling circuit has the following components: a coolant pump, a radiator, a thermostat, an expansion bottle, and a passenger compartment heater matrix. When the engine is cold, the coolant pump circulates the coolant through the engine block only. As the engine warms up, the thermostat opens and lets the coolant circulate through the radiator to lower the temperature. The top hoses going to the radiator are hotter to the touch than the bottom hoses. Let's look at how each component works. The coolant pump circulates the coolant around the engine. The coolant pump is usually powered by the accessories belt or the timing belt. The coolant pump is composed of a circular casing and an impeller wheel. The impeller wheel circulates the coolant and sends it to the circuit. The thermostat is a component that expands under heat, which regulates the coolant flow to the radiator. When the engine starts, the thermostat is closed. The engine can then get much hotter. When the operation temperature is reached, the thermostat opens partially. The coolant circulates around the radiator. When the operation temperature gets even higher, the thermostat opens completely. The flow and the cooling are at maximum. The radiator releases the heat from the coolant. An airflow helps this thermal exchange. This flux of air is provided by the movement of the vehicle or by one or two engine cooling fans. The engine cooling fans have many different operation speeds. The engine cooling fans can be controlled by the injection computer or by a thermostat on the radiator. And finally, let's look at the expansion bottle and cap. The expansion bottle provides a reserve of coolant and compensates for variations in level according to the fluid temperature. When the engine is cold, the fluid level in the expansion bottle is lower than when the engine is warm. The coolant circulates the expansion bottle and causes degassing. For correct operation, the cooling circuit must be airtight and under pressure. The cap has a valve that regulates the pressure in the circuit. The caps have a color code that corresponds to the valve's ratings. In this section, we covered the following points. The heat released by an engine needs to be evacuated so that the engine can operate properly and avoid overheating and damage. The cooling circuit is composed of a coolant pump, a radiator, a thermostat, an expansion bottle, and a passenger heater matrix. With the engine cold, the coolant only circulates in the engine block. With the engine warm, the coolant circulates in the radiator to be cooled down. When the engine is cold, the coolant pump handles the circulation of the coolant in the engine block only. The thermostat is a thermodilatable component that regulates the coolant flow of the coolant to the radiator. The radiator releases the heat from the coolant as it comes into contact with the air. The engine cooling fan accelerates the airflux. The coolant volume varies depending on the engine's temperature. The cooling circuit must be airtight and under pressure. Let's look at the operations for the cooling circuit. The coolant needs to be replaced at times, and this is explained in the Maintenance and Servicing booklet. The coolant used by Renault is Type D glycol. It has the following properties: is gel resistant, is heat resistant, prevents deposits and oxidation. When operating on the cooling circuit, always follow the following safety instructions. Watch out for the engine cooling fan starting unexpectedly. Never open the cooling circuit when the engine is warm, as you could get badly burned. Never mix different coolants together, as they can lose their effectiveness. Never fill the circuit with pure water. Never interfere with the coolant. Never carelessly throw away the coolant used, as it is bad for the environment. A malfunction in the cooling circuit causes the engine temperature to increase. The warning light linked to a temperature sensor informs the driver. If the level is below the minimum mark, check for leaks. You have several tools to check the circuit with. In any case, you can read the special tooling section in the technical documentation. You must do a cooling circuit bleed each time the circuit is opened. The principle of bleeding is to evacuate air from the cooling circuit. Bleeding of the cooling circuit is done automatically with the engine running and after starting the engine cooling fan. Always follow the procedures in the technical documentation carefully. In this section, we covered the following points. The coolant must be ice and heat resistant. It must protect the circuit from deposits and prevent oxidation in the engine. When operating on the cooling circuit when the engine is warm, always follow the following safety instructions. A fault in the cooling circuit causes the engine temperature to increase and can cause serious damage. You must do a cooling circuit bleed each time the circuit is opened.